choking and staring at me.
Did you see his face?
No, he had something over it.
Newly divorced mother of two, Morgan Metzer, awoke in her Canton, Georgia home on New Year's Day in 2021 to a masked intruder standing in her bedroom doorway. She screamed as loud as she could for help, hoping someone would hear her from outside as the suspect pinned her down and beat her with a pistol, then zip-tied and strangled her. A half hour into the assault, Morgan was sure that she was going to die, but her attacker suddenly left the scene after dragging her out onto her back porch. Before leaving the property, he told Morgan that she was going to miss her husband while using a device to distort his voice. The Metzers had divorced just a month earlier after 10 years of marriage. Shortly after the intruder left, Rodney appeared at Morgan's house claiming that a masked man had shown up at his property and told him about the intruder. He acted concerned for his ex-wife's well-being, but Morgan harbored the sneaking suspicion that Rodney was somehow involved in the assault. Investigators quickly noticed that Rodney's story didn't add up and began to share Morgan's suspicions. They found it odd that Rodney magically appeared at Morgan's house so quickly after the attack, especially when he had no reason to be there at 2 a.m, and they doubted his seemingly far-fetched claim that someone had shown up at his house and told him about the intruder. It also seemed strange that the only thing the attacker stole was Morgan's cell phone, leading detectives to believe Rodney had taken it so he could erase surveillance footage of himself entering the phone. Rodney stubbornly maintained his innocence, and he manipulated Morgan so well that at times she wondered if he was telling the truth. But the evidence spoke for itself, and Rodney pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including kidnapping and assault. He was sentenced to 70 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Number 19. The bizarre death of Bethany Deaton. Registered nurse Bethany Deaton was found dead inside her minivan in a parking lot near Kansas City, Missouri, just days after her 27th birthday in October of 2012. At first glance, there appeared to be no foul play, but a closer look at the scene led investigators to label Bethany's death as suspicious. Bethany had married her husband, Tyler Deaton, just 2 months earlier. What was supposed to be a happy time in her life had quickly transformed into heartbreak due to the lack of intimacy between the newlywed couple. When they exchanged vows, Bethany was aware that Tyler was attracted to men, which was considered a sin under the tenets of their conservative Christian faith. Despite the obvious incompatibility due to Tyler's orientation, the couple had married in hopes that he would be able to find happiness in a straight relationship. It quickly became clear that this wasn't going to happen, and investigators wondered if this somehow played a role in Bethany's death. A week after the tragedy, a man named Micah Moore confessed to killing Bethany. He claimed that he had been ordered to commit the murder by Tyler, who led an alleged cult called the Community. The Deatons lived with several members of the group, including men that Tyler was secretly being intimate with, and who police believe were brainwashed into unquestioningly following Tyler's orders. Moore told investigators that Bethany had been assaulted by group members on several occasions, and that Tyler wanted her dead because he was afraid that she would report the assaults to law enforcement. He was able to provide details that, according to police, only someone who was present during Bethany's death would have known, and was arrested following his confession. Tyler denied any involvement in Bethany's death and accused Moore of having mental issues. Not long after that, Moore recanted his confession, claiming that he had been coerced by members of the church that the cult members had belonged to before Tyler formed the Splinter Group. With a lack of forensic evidence tying anyone to Bethany's death, prosecutors dropped the case against Moore and never pursued charges against Tyler Deaton. In 2015, Tyler told 48 Hours that he partially blames himself for his wife's death because he had failed to face the truth about his orientation, and that he was not in a position to be a good husband to Bethany. But he adamantly denied harming her in any way or commanded anyone else to do so, and the circumstances surrounding Bethany's death remain unclear to this day. Number 18. Kashaan Parks. 56-year-old Beverly Parks received a call that would fill any parent with dread in May of 2024 when her daughter-in-law told her that her 39-year-old son, Kashaan Parks, had admitted to choking and assaulting a woman in the Bronx. Horrified surveillance footage showed Kashaan approaching the 45-year-old victim from behind and wrapping a belt around her neck while obscuring his face with a towel. He pulled her to the ground, choked her unconscious, then dragged her between two parked cars and assaulted her, putting her own heartbreak as a mother aside. Beverly spent more than a day persuading Kashaan to do the right thing and turn himself into the police. He eventually listened and is now in custody without bail on a slew of charges, including assault, strangulation, public lewdness, and harassment. Following Kashaan's arrest, Beverly told the New York Post that her son struggles with alcohol and drug abuse, and that he had recently lost his father prior to the attack, but she acknowledged that his grief and addiction don't excuse his actions, and that he has to take responsibility for his crimes. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 17. Terrence Wallace. In April of 2024, the cat rescue organization Little Wanderers NYC shared a disturbing video of a pit bull mauling a live cat on command at an undisclosed location in the Bronx. In the clip, the dog's owner could be heard praising it for obeying his order to attack the helpless feline. The non-profit declined to reveal the source of the sickening footage for security reasons, but said that they believe the clip is connected with an organized underground dogfighting ring that has flourished for years at public housing projects throughout the borough. Police identified the man in the video as 29-year-old Terrence Wallace, a career criminal with more than 20 prior arrests under his belt. Wallace was charged with animal torture and aggravated cruelty to animals in connection with the incident. The following month, he was charged with misdemeanor torture injury to an animal for beating and choking another dog with the animal's leash. The dog nearly died, and Wallace was arrested after someone complained to the city's 311 tip line. According to the most recent available updates, he was slated for extradition to Maine on an outstanding arrest warrant in yet another case. Number 16. Central Park Predator. A 21-year-old woman was sunbathing in Manhattan's Central Park in June of 2024 when a stranger assaulted her in broad daylight. The attack, which occurred at West 104th Street and West Drive at around 1:30 p.m., began when the suspect exposed himself to the victim, who tried to run away but was pinned to the ground. With no witnesses to intervene, the woman fought back and managed to ward off her attacker, who fled the scene on foot. Police released a composite sketch of the suspect, who's described as a 6-foot-tall black man in his 30s with a medium build and visible bags under his eyes. He was wearing a baseball cap at the time of the assault and had curly hair and a close-cut beard and mustache. The accused attacker remains at large, and authorities are encouraging anyone with information to come forward. Number 15. Veronica Klene. In April of 2023, sheriff's deputies in Volusia County, Florida, responded to a suspected poisoning call from a 24-year-old man in DeLeon Springs, who accused his child's mother of spiking his drink with cockroach spray. He told law enforcement that 29-year-old Veronica Klene wanted to continue drinking alcohol after arriving home from a bar. A short while later, he began to feel sick. The man claimed that Klene had confessed to putting Raid in his last 2 beverages and provided deputies with an audio clip of her making the admission. He said he vomited for a half hour before he was able to call for help, and he began throwing up again while speaking with law enforcement. By the time police arrived at the residence, Klene had fled the scene. She was found hiding in some bushes nearby a short while later and was booked into custody on suspicion of poisoning food or drink with intent to kill or injure. A witness told deputies that it wasn't unusual for Klene and the victim to argue, and that Klene was typically the aggressor. She had multiple previous arrests dating back to 2016, including one for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. But prosecutors dropped the poisoning charge in 2023 without an explanation for their decision, leaving their reasons for dismissing the case unclear. Number 14. Stephen McDaniel. 27-year-old Lauren Giddings was reported missing in Mason, Georgia in late June of 2011 after her family and friends had not heard from her in more than 3 days. She had recently graduated law school and planned to begin her law career in the near future, making it unlikely that she had simply run off without telling anyone. But she wasn't at her apartment and there were no signs of forced entry, leaving her whereabouts a complete mystery. As soon as word of Giddings' disappearance began to spread, local station WGXA sent a reporter to her apartment complex. They interviewed Giddings' neighbor and fellow law school graduate, 25-year-old Stephen McDaniel, who described the missing woman as nice as can be and very personable. McDaniel seemed genuinely concerned for Giddings' well-being until he overheard someone in the background mentioning that a body had been found, at which point he became visibly panicked and said he needed to sit down. By then, McDaniel was already a person of interest in the case. He was the only one of Giddings' neighbors who had refused to let police search his apartment following her disappearance, claiming that it was the lawyer in him and that he was simply protective of his things. Law enforcement kept him on their radar as he inserted himself into the search effort. During McDaniel's news interview, Giddings' dismembered torso was found in a garbage can near the building. Following the discovery, McDaniel agreed to speak with detectives but was uncooperative the entire time. For hours on end, he sat eerily still and refused to answer most questions, which stood in suspicious contrast to how talkative he was prior to Giddings' body being found. Armed with a search warrant, police returned to McDaniel's apartment where they found Giddings' underwear and a master key that McDaniel had used to enter her apartment. Further investigation revealed that McDaniel was an incel who hated women in general, and that he had stalked Giddings prior to her death. A month after Giddings vanished, he was charged with her murder. In 2014, McDaniel admitted to strangling Giddings to death, dismembering her body with a hacksaw, and discarding most of it in a dumpster across the street while throwing her torso into the garbage can where it was found. He pleaded guilty to the murder charge in exchange for a prison sentence of 30 years to life and will become eligible for parole in 2041. Number 13. Jennifer Lynn Rossi. When a fellow student stole her son's drink at school in March of 2024, one Texas mom decided to take matters into her own hands. According to Bexar County authorities, 45-year-old Jennifer Lynn Rossi mixed lemon juice, vinegar, salt, and Gatorade in a sports drink bottle and instructed her son to give it to the student who stole his drink. While the contents of the beverage were not toxic, the concoction made the child sick during gym class and sent him to the hospital with nausea and a headache. According to an arrest report, Rossi described the tainted drink as a prank, but investigators took the situation much more seriously than she seemed to, and she was booked into the Bexar County Jail on one count of injury to a child causing bodily injury. In a statement to People magazine, Sheriff Javier Salazar pointed out that Rossi's way of handling the situation was wrong, regardless of whether the allegations about her son being bullied are true. The current status of the case is unclear. Number 12. Aaron Kluger. In December of 2017, a 20-year-old Long Island man named Aaron Kluger was accused of biting his parents' dog's eye out. According to the Nassau County SPCA, the 3-year-old Shih Tzu, Chloe, was rushed to an animal hospital with her right eye detached. A veterinarian performed emergency surgery to reattach Chloe's eye and was hopeful but unsure if she would make a full recovery. The vet notified authorities of the incident and Kluger was charged with torturing and injuring an animal. A few days later, Kluger's father, Dan Kluger, told NBC New York that his son had bitten the dog's eye out by accident, stating he was kissing Chloe. She jerked away and her eye was slightly displaced. He further stated that it's easy for a Shih Tzu's eye to be displaced because they have a shallow eye socket. The American Kennel Club confirmed that this is true, but because of the nature of the news reports regarding the incident, Dan said that his son had already received hundreds of death threats and that Aaron was afraid to leave the house. He admitted that Aaron struggled with heroin addiction and was emotionally disabled, but insisted that the young man would never deliberately harm an animal. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 11. Ahmed Gasemi. After a night out with friends in April of 2015, 38-year-old Ahmed Gasemi arrived at his home in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to find a pot of rice burning on the stove and his mother's car missing from the driveway. 54-year-old Tahara Gasemi was nowhere to be found, and she wasn't answering her phone. Not long after that, Tahara's car was found abandoned and torched about 6 miles away from the Gasemi's home. Suspicion quickly fell on Ahmed, who admitted that he and his mother often argued due to her overbearing nature, causing him to feel like he had a lot less freedom than a typical man of his age. Investigators also suspected that Ahmed was eager to cash in on the $1.1 million and 2 properties that had recently been awarded to Tahara in a divorce settlement against her wealthy ex-husband and Ahmed's father, Hamid Gasemi. Ahmed insisted he was innocent. In fact, in the weeks leading up to his mother's murder, he had received 15 stitches for a head wound after being attacked by strangers in a parking lot. During that same time period, Tahara began to suspect that she was being followed. Investigators soon learned that Tahara's ex-husband, Hamid, had cheated on her with multiple women prior to their acrimonious divorce, which dragged on for 8 years in court before it was finally settled. Phone records reveal that Hamid had recently been in contact with a 20-year-old man named Tyler Ashpour using cell phone data. Police traced Ashpour's movements to a wooded area where they found Tahara's body buried in a shallow grave. She had been shot in the head. Ashpour confessed to killing Tahara with 2 accomplices named Skylar Williams and Daniel Richter. He had been recruited to help carry out the crime by Richter, who worked for Hamid as a mechanic. Eager to impress his boss, Richter had accepted Hamid's offer of $10,000 in exchange for carrying out the hit on his estranged wife, and had enlisted the help of his co-conspirators to get the job done. The trio revealed that Hamid also wanted them to kill Ahmed, but that he wasn't home when they abducted Tahara. Richter, Williams, and Ashpour pleaded guilty to reduced manslaughter charges and agreed to testify against Hamid in exchange for leniency. Ashpour died in 2023 while awaiting sentencing, and Williams and Richter was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Hamid denied any involvement in the crime and accused the other defendants of lying, but was found guilty and is serving life without parole. Number 10. Ronald Ilg. While researching murder-for-hire services on the dark web in 2020, investigative journalists discovered that an internet user was trying to hire someone to assault 2 people in Spokane, Washington. They turned the information over to FBI agents, who identified the suspect as a respected doctor in his 50s named Ronald Craig Ilg. Further investigation revealed that Ilg paid $2,000 in Bitcoin to have someone assault a former colleague and break her hands. He provided the intended victim's photo along with her name, address, and other personal information. In early 2021, Ilg sought to have his estranged wife kidnapped, drugged, and assaulted. In a message to the website's administrator requesting a rush job, he specified that he wanted the victim to be held captive for 5 to 7 days while being forcefully dosed with heroin. Ilg wanted the kidnapper to persuade the victim to stop all divorce proceedings against him, get back together with him, and never tell anyone about the kidnapping. He also wanted photos and video of the victim injecting the heroin herself and dirty needles with the woman's DNA on them to use as blackmail to get the victim to cooperate. Ilg suggested threatening to kill her dog, beat her father, and get her son addicted to heroin. Altogether, he sent more than $60,000 in Bitcoin, but the attacks were never carried out because the website he used, thankfully, does not really provide the services it advertises. Ilg was charged with attempted kidnapping and other federal crimes. He maintained his innocence as he awaited trial from behind bars. During that same time period, he wrote letters to his girlfriend, begging her to marry him so she couldn't be compelled to testify against him. He also encouraged the woman to destroy evidence by burning a letter he sent her and urged a witness to act as his public relations manager, believing he could make money off the attention the case was receiving. In January of 2023, Ilg pleaded guilty to 2 counts of threats in interstate commerce in exchange for several other charges being dropped. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and ordered to pay $125,000 in restitution and fines. Number 9. Rory Atwood. 26-year-old Rain Mancini, 25-year-old Philip Zilliot II, and their 2 children were reported missing in June of 2024 while staying at the Hudson, Florida home of their friend and landlord, 25-year-old Rory Atwood. When contacted by law enforcement, Atwood said that he had kicked the family out of his house for failing to pay rent. Investigators didn't notice anything unusual during the search of the property other than an actively smoldering and smoking backyard fire pit. The next day, a friend of Atwood's told police that he had seen dead bodies while video chatting with Atwood, who asked him to come over and help him burn some trash. During a return visit to the property with cadaver dogs, investigators found small skeletal remains, 2 human vertebrae, and soft tissue in the fire pit. They also noticed that Atwood's back porch smelled strongly of chlorine, as if someone had tried to clean up a crime scene. When confronted with the evidence, Atwood claimed that Mancini and Zilliot had charged at him with knives and a gun, leading to a struggle between him and Zilliot. He said that he wrestled the gun away from Zilliot and admitted to shooting Zilliot and Mancini, but accused his former friends of killing the other 2 victims. Atwood is facing 4 charges of first-degree murder and remains held without bond at the Pasco County Jail. Number 8. Bizarre botched extortion plot. In April of 2007, a trio of masked intruders broke into the South Kent, Connecticut home of 65-year-old multimillionaire philanthropist Ann Bass and her partner, Julian Lethbridge. The men blindfolded and bound Bass and Lethbridge, then injected the couple with a blue substance, which they claimed was a lethal virus. They told the victims that there was a life-saving antidote, but that they would only provide it if the pair paid them $8.5 million. When Bass and Lethbridge said that they had no way to pay the money, the intruders drugged them with sleeping pills and fled in Bass's Jeep. Thankfully, nothing poisonous was found in the victims' bodies. The stolen Jeep that the suspects had used as a getaway car was found abandoned outside a Home Depot store in New Rochelle, New York, just north of New York City. A few days after the attempted extortion, an accordion case filled with syringes, latex gloves, a crowbar, an airsoft gun, and a card bearing the victim's address washed up in New York's Jamaica Bay. Based on the accordion case and other evidence, including DNA and cell phone data, investigators identified the intruders as Romanian nationals Stefan Alexandru Barabbas, Emmanuel Nicolescu, and Alexandru Lucian Nicolescu. A man named Michael Kennedy was accused of driving the intruders to Bass's estate and picking them up the next morning at the Home Depot where the victim's stolen Jeep was found. By the time federal authorities sought to arrest the 4 suspects, they had fled the United States. Emmanuel Nicolescu was arrested in early 2011 after returning to the US. In 2012, he was found guilty of attempted extortion, conspiracy to commit extortion, and possession of a stolen vehicle. He's currently serving a 20-year federal prison sentence. Kennedy, also known as Nikolai Helaria, returned to the U.S. voluntarily. He pleaded guilty to attempted extortion and conspiracy in 2016 and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Alexandru Nicolescu was captured in the United Kingdom in 2013. In 2016, he pleaded guilty to attempted extortion and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Stefan Alexandru Barabbas remained at large for 15 years until 2022, when he was captured in Hungary. He faces 6 to 7 years in prison after pleading guilty to conspiracy to interfere with commerce by extortion, and is scheduled to be sentenced in September of 2024. Number 7. Amanda Chapin. 51-year-old Amanda Alicia Chapin and her husband, 71-year-old veterinarian Gary Chapin, married in March of 2022 after meeting online. Not long after that, Amanda persuaded Gary to add her to the deed of his Lafayette, Wisconsin home and to grant her power of attorney over his money and assets. Less than 3 weeks later, she began spiking her husband's coffee with animal euthanasia drugs. According to prosecutors, Amanda spiked Gary's coffee 3 times in July and August of 2022. After the third poisoning, Gary fell into a coma that lasted for 4 days. Blood tests revealed the presence of a veterinary barbiturate in his system, leading to Amanda's arrest on suspicion of attempted murder. Amanda denied poisoning her husband, whose son obtained a restraining order on his father's behalf. 2 months after the third poisoning, Amanda violated the order of protection by emailing Gary a self-pitying diatribe proclaiming her innocence. After receiving the email, Gary filed for divorce. In June of 2024, Amanda pleaded no contest to a reduced first-degree reckless endangerment charge. She faces up to 12.5 years in prison and is currently awaiting sentencing. Number 6. Vicky Jensen. Vernon Jensen met his future wife, a registered nurse named Vicky, while working as a respiratory therapist at a hospital in Boise, Idaho during the 1990s. At the time, he wasn't looking for a serious relationship, but he quickly noticed that Vicky seemed to have different expectations and that she had a controlling and possessive nature. When Vernon landed a job 2 hours away in Twin Falls, he saw it as the perfect opportunity to graciously bow out of the relationship. But Vicky insisted on moving with him, and the couple eventually got married at her insistence. Vicky's mental instability became increasingly evident over the next few years as her abuse escalated into physical violence. When a judge increased the amount of child support that Vernon was required to pay for his 2 children from a previous marriage, Vicky flew into a rage and threatened to fatally overdose his ex-wife with insulin. Vernon eventually decided that he could no longer live with Vicky's constant rage. In July of 1999, he moved into his own apartment with plans to divorce Vicky. He soon began dating a new woman named Aleta Diane Ray, and the couple moved in together. When Vicky learned about the new relationship, she became obsessed with winning back her estranged husband and began stalking Vernon and Aleta relentlessly. Her behavior was so alarming that Vernon and Aleta started planning to move out of state to escape her wrath, but they never got a chance to make their fresh start. In September of 1999, Vicky went to Vernon and Aleta's apartment with her niece, Autumn Pauls, and Autumn's ex-boyfriend, Matthew W. Pearson. Wearing disguises, they convinced Aleta to let them in to use the phone while Vernon was at work. Once inside, Vicky injected Aleta with an overdose of insulin and methamphetamine at gunpoint, then watched for an hour as the victim suffered an agonizing death. Before fleeing the scene, Vicky put methamphetamine inside Aleta's purse, hoping to disguise her death as a drug overdose. The case went unsolved for months before investigators found out that Autumn Pauls had bragged about the crime to her friends, leading to the arrest of Vicky, Pauls, and Pearson on first-degree murder charges. Vicky pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and is serving life without parole, while Pauls and Pearson served lesser sentences due to their ages. Pauls was paroled sometime after 2012, while Pearson became eligible for parole in 2015. Number 5. Sarah Rodriguez Miranda. In January of 2017, a woman contacted authorities in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with a disturbing allegation about her 19-year-old daughter, Sarah Rodriguez Miranda. She claimed that the young woman planned to kill her niece by poisoning her brother's fiance's breast milk because she was upset that the couple was allowed to live at the family's home. According to court documents, Rodriguez Miranda's mother discovered the teen's sinister plan in some text messages in a phone that the two shared. The suspect reportedly sent her boyfriend a message saying that she was so excited to mix crushed up Excedrin tablets with the milk and that she didn't have an ounce of guilt. She also expressed her confidence that she would get away with the crime, stating, "I'm honestly not worried about getting caught. They're not gonna suspect me." After discovering the messages, the young woman's mother examined bottles of breast milk inside the fridge and noticed that one was off color and had residue on the bottom. Thankfully, the tainted milk was discovered before the intended victim drank any of it, and the bottles were turned over to the police, who confirmed that the milk contained caffeine, acetaminophen, and aspirin, which are all found in Excedrin. Just one of the bottles alone contained the equivalent of 9 tablets, which is enough to kill a grown adult. Unaware that her family had caught on to her deadly intentions, Rodriguez Miranda sent a text message expressing her disappointment when the victim didn't die or show any signs of poisoning. When she learned that she was under investigation, she fled town with her boyfriend, 23-year-old Sir Marshall S. Snyder III. She stayed at Snyder's father's house in Michigan, where she was arrested 8 months later. Rodriguez Miranda pleaded guilty to attempted murder and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Snyder was also charged with attempted murder but pleaded guilty to a reduced felony aggravated battery charge, landing him a 15-year prison sentence. Number 4. Karim Zakikhani. Sarita Anderson met Karim Tyson Zakikhani in 2013 at a hospital in Houston where they were working as security guards. They soon began dating, but Anderson insisted on both of them getting tested for diseases for the sake of practicing safe intimacy. While Zakikhani tested negative for several STDs, Anderson noticed that HIV was absent from his paperwork, but her HIV test was negative, and Zakikhani promised her that his doctor would call him if he tested positive for the virus, persuaded Anderson to give him the benefit of the doubt. In the spring of 2014, Anderson began to fall ill. She thought she had the flu and tried to tough it out, but when her symptoms failed to improve, she went to the emergency room. By the time doctors discovered that she was HIV positive, her weight had dropped to just 65 pounds. Anderson had caught the virus from Zakikhani, but had previously tested negative for it because it takes up to 6 months to show in a patient's system. Zakikhani had known about his positive status for 6 years, but had failed to mention his diagnosis to Anderson or her doctors while playing the role of a concerned boyfriend. During her efforts to hold Zakikhani responsible for getting her sick, Anderson discovered that he was married and had also infected his wife with the virus. After learning that it was a crime to knowingly give someone HIV, she reported Zakikhani to the police. His arrest came several months later, and he eventually pleaded guilty to aggravated assault of a family member causing serious bodily injury, landing him a 30-year prison sentence. Anderson initially felt like her life was over after learning that she was HIV positive, but she worked hard to overcome her newfound challenges for both herself and the son she shared with Zakikhani. In 2021, she told the ID channel series Evil Lives Here that the virus had reached an undetectable level in her system thanks to the treatment she was receiving. Anderson was the only official victim in Zakikhani's case, but at least 8 other women have reportedly come forward with allegations that he infected them with HIV. Number 3. Ana Gonzalez-Angulo. In January of 2013, 50-year-old Houston oncologist Dr. George Blumenshine suddenly fell gravely ill. He became increasingly clumsy and incoherent over a several-hour period and eventually went to the emergency room, where doctors discovered that he had been poisoned with ethylene glycol, commonly found in antifreeze. This clear, odorless, and sweet but deadly compound is a favorite among criminals who poison their victims. By the time Blumenshine arrived at the hospital, his speech was extremely slurred and he was unable to walk. He survives, but he suffers permanent kidney damage, which is expected to shorten his lifespan. Upon learning that he had been poisoned, Blumenshine immediately suspected his colleague and mistress of 2 years, 43-year-old oncologist Dr. Ana Gonzalez-Angulo, of being the culprit. He had recently ended the affair to focus on his relationship with his longtime girlfriend, Dr. Yvette Tony, and Gonzalez-Angulo was extremely upset by the decision. On the day of the poisoning, Gonzalez-Angulo had persuaded Blumenshine to try a special Colombian coffee she had made. When Blumenshine commented that the coffee tasted unusually sweet, she said she had sweetened it with Splenda. His terrifying symptoms began shortly thereafter. After the poisoning, Blumenshine recorded his phone conversations with Gonzalez-Angulo, who tried shifting the blame to Tony. In the meantime, investigators uncovered additional evidence implicating Gonzalez-Angulo in the crime, leading to her arrest for aggravated assault. The prosecution had a strong case which included witness testimony about Gonzalez-Angulo's obsession with bloom and shine. But as a renowned cancer specialist, the accused poisoner was credited with saving many lives. She had a reputation for being extremely dedicated to her patients, which made it difficult for some of the people she had helped to believe that she was capable of committing such a horrific crime, while others believed she deserved leniency based on the good things she had done. In September of 2014, a jury found Gonzalez-Angulo guilty as charged. Prosecutors recommended a 30-year prison sentence, but the judge sentenced her to a 10-year term with a possibility of parole after 5 years. She was released in 2018 and completed her parole in 2023. Today's topic was requested by Wes Martin 3829 and Kenny Foxy 2444. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. The kidnapping and murder of Mahogany Jackson. Early one morning in February of 2024, 20-year-old single mother Mahogany Jackson frantically text messaged family members saying that she was being held captive at an apartment in Birmingham, Alabama. She shared her location and told her loved ones to call the police, but they didn't discover the messages until hours later. The next day, investigators found Jackson's murdered body at an illegal trash dumping site. In the meantime, a witness came forward with information about the crime and videos of Jackson being assaulted, leading to the interrogation and arrest of several suspects. According to prosecutors, Jackson was hanging out with a group of people at the home of 24-year-old Brandon Pope when she got upset with someone for stealing back a gun that she had stolen, triggering a series of attacks that eventually led to her murder. In one cell phone video, 2 suspects could be seen stomping and spitting on Jackson as she pleaded with her attackers to let her go. Multiple other suspects participated in the assault as Jackson was kicked, punched, stripped, dragged by her hair to a vehicle and forced into the trunk. She was taken to the apartment she messaged her family from, where her assailants handcuffed her and continued to film themselves torturing her. She was so terrified that she lost control of her bowels and defecated on the floor and was then forced to shower at gunpoint. At some point, 18-year-old Jeremiah Kodiak McDowell and 25-year-old Brandon Ace Harris and Brandon Pope forced Jackson into a car and drove her to the dump site where her body would later be found. Pope and McDowell later told investigators that Harris shot Jackson in the back of the head while they were cleaning garbage out of his car, leading to capital murder and kidnapping charges against all 3 suspects. 5 other suspects are also facing felony murder and kidnapping charges, including 26-year-old Teja Lewis, 23-year-old Sanaya McCall, 23-year-old Giovanni Clapp, 25-year-old Blair Green, and 23-year-old Ariana Lachey Robinson. The defendants are being held without bail while prosecutors fight to obtain justice for Jackson, who they say was fully aware that she was going to die as she suffered for hours at the hands of her captors. Number 1. Asamad Nash. During the pre-dawn hours one morning in February of 2022, a predator followed 35-year-old Christina Lee to her 6th-floor apartment in Manhattan's Chinatown and brutally stabbed her to death. A neighbor overheard Lee screaming for help and dialed 911, and she was still screaming when officers arrived, but they couldn't get the door open, even with a sledgehammer, and by the time someone arrived with the proper tools to make a forced entry, it was too late to save Lee's life. Chilling surveillance footage showed the killer grabbing the building's front door as it swung closed behind Lee. He stayed 1 floor behind her as he trailed her to her apartment, then barged into the residence just before the door closed and attacked Lee with a knife from her own kitchen. Police arrived to find the victim covered in stab wounds in her bathtub. The suspect, 25-year-old Asamad Nash, tried fleeing via the fire escape, but saw a police officer on the building's roof and barricaded himself inside Lee's bedroom. He was arrested at the scene and detained without bail, pending the outcome of his case. Described in news reports as a homeless career criminal, Nash has a lengthy rap sheet dating back to 2012. At the time of Una Lee's murder, he had several open cases and was on supervised release for damaging Metro card machines at subway stations. In another incident, shortly before the homicide, Nash was arrested for punching a man at a subway station in an unprovoked fashion. He also has a history of using the drug K2, which is known to cause violent and erratic behavior. Based on Nash's criminal history, authorities believe that he followed Una Lee into her apartment with the intention of robbing her. In June of 2024, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree burglary in exchange for a prison sentence of 30 years to life. Thanks for watching. If you had to do the trustful challenge, who would you rather be the person that is supposed to catch you? Joe Biden, Jeffrey Dahmer, or Donald Trump? Let us know in the comments section below.